I would not be surprised if you start seeing, as the election approaches, you're going to see crypto starting to trade up to that $90,000, $100,000 level. And I wouldn't be surprised that with a Trump victory, you see it moving into that $100,000 and $150,000 level. This is a huge trading opportunity for individuals.
How do the elections affect the crypto and Bitcoin markets? We're talking about this theme with our next guest, Russell Starr, former CEO and head of capital markets at DeFi Technologies. What is next for the price and ultimately adoption? Welcome to the show, Russell. Good to see you.
Likewise, Dave. Thanks for having me on.
It was very interesting because the day of the Trump assassination attempt, the Bitcoin price moved up. Pretty much immediately after the news broke out. It was a weekend, and so most markets haven't opened, but Bitcoin moved first before the stock markets moved the following Monday. Why do you think it did that?
Well, there were a couple of factors, Dave. The biggest factor, in my opinion, was that the Mt. Gox selling out of the German government had stopped, and so you immediately had less selling pressure. But equally as important, maybe even more importantly, Trump has trumpeted and touted that as part of his platform, he's a pro-crypto libertarian. He believes that crypto has a place in the U.S. economic advancement. And if you just even look at his running mate now, JD Vance, they believe in a weaker U.S. dollar to help the U.S. economy. And so you marry those two things and you end up with a stronger Bitcoin price. And then, of course, you factor in the limited selling or at least the completion of the selling from the German government, which is paradoxical in my opinion. Germany should have probably kept that. But no, that resulted in a higher Bitcoin price. And I think you're going to be seeing it substantially higher as people start to factor in a Trump victory more and more, and Trump becomes more vocal about his support of Bitcoin.
Let's go over Trump's recent support of Bitcoin. So previously, in a couple of years ago, Trump was very vocally anti-Bitcoin, anti-crypto. He's recently changed his stance. First of all, why do you think he's changed his stance?
Well, I think fundamentally, if you look at his platform, that's the biggest reason. He and Vance believe that the U.S. needs a weaker U.S. dollar. They're not fans of the U.S. dollar being the de facto settlement currency for all things commodities. And when you look at that and take a bigger lens on the entire U.S. economy, it only makes sense that they would be pro-crypto and adopt that as part of the platform because it's still unknown as to whether or not the U.S. has any gold at Fort Knox. Instead of going out and buying a ton of gold, you can take a different position as well and marry yourself to a certain extent to Bitcoin. And that's what they're doing. And I wouldn't be surprised for them to start talking gold up a little bit as well.
Okay, so that the U.S. and Western countries, they don't go out and buy their Bitcoin. I believe most of the Bitcoin they have in their stock was confiscated from criminals. So that's what happened up until now. Are you saying that suppose we have a pro-Bitcoin government, we can have a government actually going out and actively adopting Bitcoin? Could that happen?
Yeah, no, I absolutely think it's going to happen. And even if it doesn't happen in that way, shape, or form, just having the SEC not chasing basically every Bitcoin company as a criminal, not taking every Bitcoin adoption or Bitcoin idea, the Bitcoin ETF, the Ethereum ETF. If you actually have a pro crypto SEC, you're going to have a much broader based capital market. You're going to see the NASDAQ allowing more companies such as DeFi to trade in the U.S. And you end up with a similar outcome.
Okay, so Trump has said on his campaign trail that he's going to oppose Elizabeth Warren's goons, quote unquote.
And I will also stop Joe Biden's crusade to crush crypto. We're going to stop it. I will ensure that the future of crypto and the future of Bitcoin will be made in the USA, not driven overseas. I will support the right to self-custody to the nation's 50 million crypto holders. I say this with your vote. I will keep Elizabeth Warren and her goons away from your Bitcoin. And I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency.
A lot of this is just political rhetoric. Concretely, though, what are his pro-Bitcoin policies?
Well, again, the single biggest one is, in my opinion, just turning the SEC into a pro-Bitcoin entity. Typically when you think of the U.S., it's a country that you think of the Wild Wild West, you think of the gold rush, you think of a country where they were very, very early in terms of adoptions of railways. People come to the U.S. because it's the land of the free, the land of opportunity, the land of entrepreneurship, and taking a negative Bitcoin stance, which the Biden government and the SEC has done, despite Gensler running a lot of his academic history as a pro Bitcoin or pro crypto academic. You end up stymieing the growth, and you eliminate it as a source of revenue from a tax basis. You end up pushing all of the entrepreneurship to other jurisdictions, which has happened. Our company, for example, we would have been exceedingly happy to be launching all of our ETFs in the US, but instead of launching them in the US, we've launched them all in Europe. We're doing incredibly well. We're making a ton of free cash flow off of it. And that is not a good thing when you think about entrepreneurship in the US.
Yeah. Is crypto still a partisan issue? Because let me just, some recent news from the Democrat side. The Senate Majority Chuck Schumer, right? He actually spoke against some of Elizabeth Warren's anti-crypto policies earlier in the year. He wants to undo some of the SEC guidelines that discourage crypto adoption and banks holding digital assets. He wants to have a broader discussion. Quite a few Democrats voted in favor with the Republicans to undo some of these SEC guidelines earlier in the year. So perhaps the Democrats are also favoring a more pro-Bitcoin stance. Is that what's happening?
Well, I mean, yes and no, right? So there was a bipartisan bill that went all the way to Biden. Biden ended up vetoing it, despite the fact that it had bipartisan support, which would have allowed effectively all the banks and all the asset managers to carry Bitcoin on their balance sheet and custody it. I think if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, that's going to be in front of Biden again. But it almost becomes a moot point now, because I think people are seeing that the U.S. is at Congress and the House level. These politicians are sort of reading the tea leaves, seeing what Trump's going to be doing, and like a true politician is or does, they typically. And again, obviously, I'm not a politician. I got to say this with a little bit of a grain of salt, but. Politicians aren't known for following policy because of what they believe in. They tend to follow what's going to get them elected, and what the new president is going to do. So my suspicion is that this new bipartisan movement has more to do with them getting reelected and less to do with anything other than politics. And again, it follows suit with the SEC, right? I wouldn't be surprised if you saw every layer of management in the SEC replaced with a new Trump government. And so it's more people just jumping on the bandwagon, and the bandwagon before was a negative crypto positioning, and now it's a positive crypto positioning. And so you're seeing all these different layers of government moving towards that. Now, that being said, there are constituents, like we do have a lot of U.S. holders of DeFi who are absolutely shocked and aghast at what the SEC and the U.S. government has been doing over the last, call it 10 years, and are looking extremely forward to a more libertarian approach to the crypto universe, and adopting crypto as part of a political platform.
Let's talk about Trump's running mate JD Vance and what his stance on the U.S. dollar is. What's his broader thesis on the dollar right now? I mean, he has said openly that he wants a weaker US dollar. I don't know exactly what he means by that. A weaker US dollar. Is he talking about just a decline in the currency pair versus other major currencies? Is he talking about some other geopolitical issues? How are you interpreting his thesis?
Well, again, I mean, this is really, really recent news, but if you look at some of his historical rhetoric, and he's a capitalist by nature, a private equity guy, I believe. He, from what I've read and what I understand, believes that having the US dollar as the settlement currency is causing the U.S. an unnecessary headwind economically, and that the U.S. would benefit from a weaker dollar. And you can see it whenever there's a challenge or an issue in the broader capital markets. There's a massive flight to the U.S. dollar, and you see it spike for no reason at all. It arguably may be one of the weakest currencies, or should be one of the weakest currencies in the world by virtue of the amount of debt that they have on the balance sheet. But regardless, because it's always sat as sort of the de facto settlement currency for all things commodities, you see this flight to what they call safety, and I would call the U.S. dollar the furthest thing from safety. But that is indeed what happens. It's not to gold. It's not to crypto. It's basically to the U.S. dollar. And typically you see the crypto and gold actually sell off in those situations. And then ultimately they rally, which is what I think you're seeing now. So I think Vance wants to eliminate that. They want to eliminate the U.S. dollar as sort of the de facto settlement currency. They want to allow the U.S. dollar to trade where it should trade, which many people would argue is in a much less in a weaker state against many other currencies. It'll be interesting to see how they go about doing it. But one of the ways of doing it is embracing crypto and embracing Bitcoin. And so, capital markets and strategists, we were talking about your history with BCA research and your background. I would not be surprised if you start seeing, as the election approaches, definitely you're going to see, you're on the record here with me saying it, you're going to see crypto starting to trade up to that $90,000, $100,000 level. And I wouldn't be surprised that with a Trump victory, you see it moving into that $100,000 and $150,000 level. This is a huge trading opportunity for individuals, in my opinion. And when you put companies like DeFi, we're only trading at 3-4 times earnings right now. Most companies trade at 20-40 times earnings, especially growth companies. This could be a huge boon for a company such as ours. And in my opinion, a huge trading opportunity for people who want to get long Bitcoin in the crypto space.
Okay, we're going to come back to DeFi Technologies in just a minute. Yeah. A lot of interesting developments there. Going back to the weaker dollar outlook here. Why? Okay, so let's just walk through this. Why would you, as a consumer, and me as a consumer as well, what would you want a weaker U.S. dollar? Keep in mind that a lot of the GDP comes from consumption, importing goods. With the weaker dollar, your purchasing power relative to other foreign goods declines, right? Would you want that?
Remember, though, Trump wants more things made in America, right? So a weaker U.S. dollar helps U.S. goods become more competitive. So if you're actually creating an economic entity, i.e., the U.S., and you're bringing everything home, you're bringing production home, you're bringing factories home, and these are all very, very well-known policies for the Trump economic campaign. By weakening the U.S. dollar, you make all of that new U.S. production, all of those entities, those commodities, goods and services, you make them far more competitive globally. It is ironic, though. It should create a little bit of inflation as well, and they're also they're running an anti-inflation campaign. So there's some juxtaposition there. But as I was mentioning, I have a master's degree in economics, econometrics. Started my PhD. If indeed this is the platform that they pursue, like I said, weaker U.S. dollar, stronger Bitcoin, stronger gold. All things that would be very, very good for U.S. production.
Let's walk through the logic here. Weaker U.S. dollar, stronger Bitcoin. Can you just walk through the steps there?
Yeah, well, if indeed Trump adopts Bitcoin as part of his economic agenda, you're gonna see a tremendous flight towards Bitcoin. Bitcoin in and of itself is an anti-inflationary entity. It's got a fixed amount of Bitcoin that can be produced forever in the lifetime of Bitcoin. So you should see the Bitcoin price moving higher. Theoretically, you should see the US dollar moving lower. And like I mentioned, you should also see gold and commodity prices moving higher. And then with the weaker US dollar, and if Trump, let's say they start buying Bitcoin as part of their economic agenda, Bitcoin prices go higher. That helps their balance of trade. That helps their government debt situation. The weaker U.S. dollar makes U.S. producing companies far more competitive, and on and on and on.
So the U.S. dollar stops becoming the de facto settlement payment currency, right? Why would cryptos take its place? We're talking about letting the market decide what should be the optimal settlement currency. What does Bitcoin or crypto do that is makes it superior to the dollar?
Well, you're starting to see countries such as Saudi Arabia. You're seeing China, Russia. All of these countries have been embarking on efforts to actually disintermediate the U.S. dollar. You have the petro yuan. You've got Saudi Arabia right now. A lot of people don't know this, but the Middle East is the fastest growing country in terms of crypto adoption. You've got the Saudi Arabian government starting to talk about settling oil and gas in Bitcoin. So it's interesting that you're actually looking at a presidency. And let's be blunt. Again, you're going to hear it on the record for me. I don't see a chance of the Democrats winning. So this is a landslide Trump victory. But if you've got a government in the U.S., such as the Trump government, pursuing a weaker dollar policy, bringing Bitcoin onto their balance sheet, and you've got a country such as Saudi Arabia, who's more than happy to see the U.S. dollar disintermediated and settle oil and gas in Bitcoin, both of those factors achieve the same thing at the same time. So you could really see this working because you've also got China and Russia pursuing a non-U.S. dollar strategy. You're seeing, both of them sell U.S. treasuries faster than they've ever sold them. So this could actually be a policy agenda that works out really, really well in terms of what Trump and Vance are trying to push. Again, though, you're going to start importing inflation, which is a whole other can of worms. But we're not talking about that now. We're just talking about the weaker U.S. dollar position.
Okay, well, let's suppose we have higher inflation, right? As a Bitcoin holder, I would want something, like you said, Bitcoin may be perceived as an inflation hedge. I would want to hold it as a store of value and transact with something else, like let's say use a stable coin. So wouldn't we see actually a rise in stable coin usage versus Bitcoin usage?
I think you're going to see a rise in everything, because if you've got the same platform agenda where they're let's say they're going to replace Gensler, they're going to become very, very pro crypto. Again, this isn't about DeFi, but you're going to see companies like DeFi get listed on the NASDAQ in a heartbeat. And you're going to see investors, i.e. the entire U.S. public, starting to move all of their capital flows. Let's again call a spade a spade. There's 7 companies which are floating the entire U.S. capital markets right now. You could actually see a massive movement, flow of capital away from those companies. And of course, they're incredible companies. Is incredible. Microsoft, Apple. I'm not diminishing their value as companies, but you're going to see, in my opinion, a tidal wave of capital starting to flow into these crypto companies. You can be long a company like DeFi or some of these other companies, and you're going to have that hedge that you're talking about. We DeFi, we launch crypto ETFs. And so you don't even have to pick a winner. You just get long DeFi. You're long all of these other coins that you're talking about, not necessarily stable coins, but Core, Toncoin, Solana. And you've got that perfect hedge right there. And you can outpace inflation by being long, as you just pointed out, crypto as a part of your portfolio.
Let's talk about the upcoming ETFs. ETH ETF, widely anticipated. Late May, it was announced that the SEC approved it. The ETH price pretty much soared 20% overnight on that news. Then it's been coming down ever since. The market just doesn't seem excited anymore, right? What's happening there?
Well, I don't think that it's as simple as that, as sort of your prognostication. You had a massive seller of Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoin is the tide that kind of floats all boats. You can't look at Ethereum exogenously from Bitcoin. So if you got Bitcoin coming down, it's kind of dragging down all the other prices. Now that you've actually had that selling completed, Bitcoin is starting to trade higher. You now have the Genesis bankruptcy, of course, which is another liquidity event. I don't know how that's going, and I have to look at it. But I think you will see Ethereum start to trade higher. I think you're going to start to see that whole ecosystem starting to move. And I do believe that there will be a time where Bitcoin and Ethereum separate from a correlation basis. You're going to see Ethereum trading independently. And then I think, to your point, you're going to see the altcoins also having a life of their own. In fact, our view is, as a company, and me just sort of as an economist, I actually think part of the reason you want to be long DeFi is because those altcoins are going to be the real movers on top of watching Bitcoin probably double here in the next year. And Ethereum, I suspect, is going to double or triple as well.
Are you going to create some ETH ETF products or ETPs?
We already have them. We already have them. It's funny. Everybody's also excited with Bitcoin and Ethereum. We have what's called Bitcoin Zero and Ethereum Zero. We charge zero management fees. These are all trading in Europe. As I mentioned, Europe is a far more
right. Yeah, I forgot.
crypto.
So outside of the U.S., ETF products have already been allowed.
Yeah.
Right? So these products are available in Canada and Europe, right?
No, Canada again. I should stick true to my word. The Canadian and U.S. regulators are idiots. They've pursued blindly this anti-crypto. I'm sorry, I don't even know what else to say. Everybody jokes at me, but
Is that honestly, a technical term?
yeah, sorry, they're nearsighted. They're not thinking outside the box.
I understand.
I can be a lot more politically correct, but the reality is that the Canadian regulators and the U.S. regulators have been nonsensical. This is an ecosystem that's being embraced globally. Europe has fantastic rules around them. These are not securities; they're commodities. They should basically we're launching crypto ETFs. We have 25 of them across 25 different products. Although we do have numerous Bitcoin products, but basically you can launch these ETF products in Europe unencumbered. Here in Canada and the US, they just make it a nightmare. All of that's going to change, which is, of course, another reason to start getting long these companies, and in particular, obviously ours. I got to plug that a bit.
When can we expect ETH ETFs to actually hit U.S. markets?
I think that's going to happen in the next month or so, and then I think you're going to start seeing the Solanas, the Ton coins, the Hashideras, all of these other ETFs, you're going to see them launched in short order. This is probably all going to be coincident with the Biden loss, and basically, again, Gensler is going to get turfed. His entire effort, you and I were talking about it. What's the definition of insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Literally, the SEC has embarked and pursued a strategy of litigating, losing nonstop. They haven't won one. They continue to lose, while this ecosystem flourishes everywhere else in the world. So end of 2024, early 2025, you're going to start seeing these ETFs launched everywhere in the world, including the US and Canada.
What some people are concerned about is the, I guess, reversal of policy and accepting cryptos as payments unilaterally. This recently happened in the UAE, previously a very pro-Bitcoin and crypto country, with Dubai touted as a new mecca of crypto. And then just overnight in late June, as you know, they released new regulations. Some lawyers are speculating now this basically means they're prohibiting the acceptance of cryptocurrencies for goods and services unless they are licensed dirham payment tokens, right? This is one interpretation of law. The UAE is not the US, but could it happen here?
I don't know. I do see the rationale behind it, and I do see you like probably what you're going to see is Bitcoin, probably Ethereum, and then a lot of the stable coins. Those will be your payment tokens, but the ecosystem itself isn't theoretically about payments, right? There's lending tokens. Telegram's token, Ton coin, has a life of its own. You've seen, I got to be careful what I call it, the SHIT coins, Doji. People are making millions of dollars off of these, but by no means should they be accepted as payment, right? So I do see a world where you have
Elon Musk disagrees with you, by the way. Elon Musk thinks Doge is a better form of payment than anything else, but I don't know if he was trolling.
Well, I think he was probably trolling, and he was probably more referencing the US dollar than anything, just because of his, just how look, the US dollar stands on nothing, right? It's backed by a government that's effectively bankrupt. But forgetting all of that, I think you're going to see a world where you have 4 or 5 of these that are accepted as generic. Call it cash, call it whatever you want. They're going to be your payment tokens, and then you've got this other ecosystem that's going to be, how do we eliminate and allow people to send wire payments? Maybe that's going to be Uniswap. I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but it's this entire ecosystem. It's predicated on disintermediating and allowing the entire world to have access to call it a banking system without being encumbered by the likes of a JP Morgan rule or a Goldman Sachs rule. You're going to have people who can send money from Afghanistan. You're going to see houses trade on blockchains and cars trade on blockchains. That's the 20, 30, 40 year future. But the more near term sort of outcome is just going to be a re-rating of the entire ecosystem to a higher level, because of its use case, and as you mentioned, because of a payment system or an application of a payment system for the likes of Bitcoin, Ethereum, some of the stable coins.
Importantly, Trump also has vowed to ban or block a CBDC in the U.S.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on this?
Oh, brilliant. The problem with the U.S. dollar, call it the Canadian dollar, call it, pick any of these developed nations and their currencies. The challenge is that when you create a CBDC, you're just making it easy to issue more U.S. dollars. You can push a button and you devalue the U.S. dollar by X. You'll remember this from Econ 101 or Econ 102 or second year, whatever it is. The actual definition of inflation is the printing of M1. You create a CBDC, you're going to have unfettered, limitless creation of dollars, euros, whatever. That is not what crypto stands for. That's not what Bitcoin was created for. The whole premise behind these cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin specifically, is to stop the devaluation and the brutal sort of devaluation of our hard-earned dollars in whichever jurisdiction you live in.
Let's back up a minute. Regardless of whether or not a U.S. CBDC happens under a Trump presidency or a Biden presidency, doesn't matter. 134 countries around the world, which represents 98% of global GDP, are exploring this possibility. Yeah. So they're still going to go ahead with it, even if, let's say, the U.S. doesn't go ahead with it. Why is there this global trend happening?
It's a way of them controlling it in a more cost-effective and ledger-based way, right? They're going to know who owns exactly what. There's going to be more government control. I mean, this is the perfect system if you want to actually control everyone and know what everybody has. I really think the CBDC communication strategy, whatever you want to call it, I think it's going to end up as a complete and utter failure. I think governments would love to do it, but I think you're going to see citizens basically ignoring them as an opportunity. You're going to see people buying, companies such as us, or buying tokens such as Solana, Bitcoin, Ethereum. They're going to stay away from the whole CBDC idea. So it's an interesting application or thought process. I just don't think it's going to have any success. Famous last words.
Suppose it happens in the U.S. or Canada. Would you? Yep. How would you? And shareholders ask you, go ahead and please create some products around CBDCs. Let's monetize this for your shareholders. How would you do it?
I wouldn't. That's the easy answer. I think we would avoid that like the plague. We'd rather. I mean, if you look at what we've been doing recently, we bought. We have a ton of cash on our balance sheet. Our company's changed completely from Q1 to now. We had 40 million or 45 million in debt. We now have basically about 5 million in debt. We have close to 75 million US on our balance sheet. We're investing that in Bitcoin Core, the Core DAO, which is a really interesting new product, and Solana. Our view is we'd rather have our money in Bitcoin, Solana, and Core than in US dollars. And I think you're going to see that as a trend. And MicroStrategy, which is, the most famous company for this, is trading at, many multiples of the actual Bitcoin that it has on its balance sheet, because people love that as a strategy. So I really don't think you're going to see CBDCs as a way of moving forward. You'll start seeing companies who are making a lot of money, just like us, buying Bitcoin, and maybe some of the other ones that we think have a really great use case.
So over the course of the last, I'm just looking at the charts here, over the course of the last 5 years, DeFi Technologies is up about 148%. The last 1 year, it's up 1,200%. Year to date, it's up 182%. So the stock is outperforming Bitcoin and most other large cryptos. I'm not talking about the smaller altcoins. Is it other company developments you can attribute this growth to?
Yeah.
Or is it a leverage play to Bitcoin?
No.
That's what.
So the biggest changes were, look, there were a couple of shareholders who had large positions, which they took a position that we didn't take. They viewed crypto and DeFi as a losing proposition. They blew out stock down to as low as 8 cents. Management at the time actually bought all of that. So I personally am long 18 to 20 million shares. Other management combined, a bunch of us own about 120 million shares of the 320 million fully diluted. But what's really changed is, when the Bitcoin ETF was permitted, it was basically proof of concept for what we were doing. People were speculating that these ETF products would never be allowed in the US. Bam, the US Bitcoin ETF is allowed. You validate our business model. Like I said, we have 25 of these ETFs trading in Europe. Then we generate 2% on our management fees, but we also generate close to 7.5% on yield from staking all of these. You're not allowed to do that in the US. So we have a really strong revenue model where the higher our AUM, the greater our revenue. Then you add in a third component. We have an extremely low cost structure. So the miners, it's extremely costly to operate a mining company. It only costs us $10 million a year to run this company. So if we get to $2 billion in AUM, we're going to make $200 million in revenue. These are all US dollars. We're going to make $190 million in profit, net income.
Right. If I were to make the, I guess, bearish argument, bear with me here,
Yep.
Pun intended. Yep. You've got a lot of competition now. Everyone on the street is trying to make an ETF product for Bitcoin and next
in the US.
In the US. Well, you've got the Vanguards and the Black Rocks. They have low cost structures as well. They're known for being low cost ETFs. It's time to short your company because it's already gone up. How would you respond to that bear argument?
Wow. Good luck would be the first one. We actually had someone do a short report, and I'm pretty sure it's about to backfire incredibly. We've generated $100 million US in revenue in the last 3 months. That's a lot of real cash flow. We're trading at about a $400 million market cap. So in one quarter of operations, we're trading at 4 times our earnings. You got to look at an annualized basis. We're going to do close to 160, 170 million in revenue on an annualized basis, 150, 160, 170 million in profits. So shorting a company at 3 times earnings with that much of a profit model is a dangerous application. You're suggesting that competition is going to whittle this down. The challenge with that is, first of all, these guys are operating in the US, we're operating in Europe, and it took us 3 years to get regulatory approval to actually get into this business. So anyone who wants to compete with us is likely going to have to go through that same regulatory nightmare to actually get there. So we have an operating moat of about, call it 2 years right now. Last year was a bear market. No one was trying to get into this business. So people are probably just starting to do it now. And the other thing I'd throw out there is the BlackRocks of the world and the Vanguards and the Coinbases and the Galaxies. These are companies that are trading at 23 to 40 times earnings. We're trading at 3 or 4 times earnings. Really? Do you think they're going to spend 3 or 4 years trying to get into this industry and do what we're doing? Or do you think they're just going to pay 12 times earnings and buy us? So shorting us right now, I think, is a really, really dangerous perspective. I really do appreciate. It's a phenomenal question, but I think the higher likelihood is that one of these guys comes in and buys us.
Is that what you're positioning? Is that what you're positioning the company to do right now? A buyout?
Well, I mean, ultimately, that's what every micro cap and small cap should be thinking of. You want to create something that someone else wants, and you want to ultimately get taken out. But on the off chance get taken out, we're looking, we've already press released this. We're looking to grow, and we've opened an office in the Middle East. We're looking to grow. We haven't done anything in Asia, but we're looking to grow in Asia. We're in massive growth phase. So we're trying to take advantage of that regulatory moat that I just talked to you about and grow in these other jurisdictions. Do I think competition's coming? Absolutely. But again, this is an ecosystem that's growing 2 times faster than the internet. It's going to take a lot of competition to actually catch up to as fast as the actual ecosystem is growing. And so you've got a real excellent opportunity to make a lot of money getting long DeFi here for 2, 3, 5, 10 years. I don't know what it is. And yes, are we positioning ourselves for a takeout? Absolutely. We own close to 30% of the company as management. And again, one last data point. We just applied to start buying back our own stock because we're so cheap. So we're starting a buyback process. Look, there's all sorts of factors that would prohibit me and stop me from looking at this as a short.
Okay. Do you have a U.S. strategy at all, or are you just staying out of that market?
Yeah, so the minute we can actually compete in the US, we'll go there, but we're not going to go as a Bitcoin or an Ethereum. We're going to look to passport some of our other more intriguing products that no one else is doing. So Toncoin, Core. We actually have a Bitcoin yield product where people can get long our Bitcoin product and get paid 6% yield. And that's because we're using the core DAO to actually generate staking yields on Bitcoin, which is something that no one's even thought about. So we'll bring those products to the US and let the big boys fight for the Bitcoins and the Ethereums.
Because let's suppose Trump does get into office, like we talked about, and let's suppose we do have a more pro Bitcoin, pro crypto set of policies in the U.S. Surely you want to take advantage of that somehow, right?
Oh, we absolutely will. We're talking to entities in Canada. We do have entities in the U.S. that we're looking at working with. We absolutely look. We're kind of in a first mover advantage here, or second, third mover. There's some other companies. Our purest competitor is a private company. We will absolutely look to take advantage of it. But again, you got to be smart when you're going up against a BlackRock. And again, our position is, look, we want to do what they aren't doing better than anyone else. So yes, we have a Bitcoin product. It's great, but I think our Bitcoin yield product is something that they would actually covet because we have a proprietary relationship with Core. No one else can do this. So you're going to see someone coming in and saying, wow, they can offer a Bitcoin strategy where you're actually paying the client 5%. These are the reasons why I think we're going to be high on that list of a takeout. And again, of course, when you're trading at 3 times earnings, someone can pay 12, 14, 15 times earnings. So you could see someone pay 500% premium for us, and it would still be a take under for them because they're trading at 23 times earnings. So there's all sorts of cool reasons to be long us.
All right. Well, Russell, I appreciate your thoughts and your updates in the crypto industry. We'll put the link to DeFi Technologies down below. Thank you for being a part of the program.
Love it. Really appreciate all the thoughtful and provocative conversations, topics, Dave, and hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. And thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and follow and subscribe and follow DeFi Technologies and the links down below.